Picture this. You wake up one morning, and everyone around you seems off. Not just a little weird, but completely detached from logic, reason, or even basic self-awareness. Then it hits you. This isn't a bad dream. This is your everyday reality. Now flip the thought around. What if you're not the one who's lost it? What if you're the last sane person in a world that's gone completely mad? That's what we're diving into today. The strange and unsettling idea of mass psychosis. It's when whole societies fall into a kind of collective trance, where stupidity, illusion, and blind obedience take over. We'll talk about why it happens, how to spot it, and, most importantly, how to escape it. If you stick with me until the end, you'll hear something that might completely change how you see the world, and maybe even yourself. Here's a tough truth. Humans aren't always rational. Even with all our science, history, philosophy, and tools for thinking clearly, we often act like a flock of sheep chasing imaginary wolves. History is full of examples where empires collapsed not because of enemies outside their borders, but because of illusions and delusions from within. This isn't new. Back in the 1600s, the philosopher René Descartes warned that our senses could fool us. What he didn't know was just how badly an entire society could fool itself. Today, psychologists have a name for it: mass formation psychosis, when large groups of people lose touch with reality and get swept away by false stories, emotional hysteria, or manipulative ideologies. But what causes this breakdown in reason? The psychiatrist Carl Jung believed that when people lose meaning, purpose, or spiritual grounding, they become open to suggestion. Without a strong sense of self, we look for identity in the herd, and the herd, more often than not, is driven by fear, propaganda, and the need to belong, even if it means throwing truth out the window. Just think about the last few years. Social media wars, endless news cycles, culture clashes. We've seen people repeat slogans they don't understand, support movements they haven't researched, and attack anyone who dares question the mainstream. Is that intelligence? Progress? Or is it a sign that society is sliding into a kind of mental and spiritual breakdown? The French thinker Gustave Le Bon once explained that when people are in a crowd, they lose their sense of responsibility and clear thinking. They stop acting like rational adults and start acting like emotional children, quick to anger, easy to manipulate, desperate to fit in. And that's the danger. The more people disconnect from critical thinking, the easier they are to control. Mass psychosis isn't just a fancy psychology term. It's something you can see in real life. It happens when people stop thinking for themselves and let authority figures, the media, or popular opinion define their reality. Ask yourself, how many opinions you hear every day are actually someone's own, and how many are just echoes of what they've been told to believe? Fear is what really accelerates the madness. Fear is the fuel of collective hysteria, and those in power, knowingly or not, have used it for centuries to move the crowd in whatever direction they want. From religious crusades to political regimes, from financial panics to health scares, fear has been manufactured and weaponized again and again. But here's the scariest part. When you're surrounded by people caught up in mass psychosis, they don't think they're the ones who've lost touch with reality. They think you have. Suddenly, asking questions is dangerous. Curiosity becomes a crime. Staying silent feels safer than speaking the truth. In that kind of climate, real intelligence and sanity can feel very, very lonely. So what can we actually do about it? The first step is awareness. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." In other words, if you don't see the forces messing with your mind, you'll never break free from them. Mass psychosis feeds on passivity, on silence, on blind conformity. It thrives when people stop asking why. Have you noticed how hard it's become to have a calm, rational conversation these days? Why do some people laugh at honest questions instead of answering them? Why is disagreement often treated as hate? Why do truth-tellers get more resistance than people who spread comforting lies? Maybe it's not ignorance at all. Maybe it's that people are choosing to run away from reality. Because illusions feel safer than truths that might shake everything they believe. The scary thing is, this escape comes with rewards. It promises safety, belonging, and identity. But the price? Your independence of thought. Think back to a time you disagreed with almost everyone around you, not because you wanted to be difficult, but because something deep inside whispered, "This just doesn't feel right." Maybe it was during a news story, in a classroom, or while friends discussed a trending topic. You stayed quiet, or maybe you spoke up and paid the price. That moment, small as it seemed, gave you a peek into the machine that enforces conformity and silences inner truth. Here's the thing. The human brain isn't just wired for survival, it's wired for belonging. For our ancestors, being cast out of the tribe meant death. And even though we're not dodging lions on the savannah anymore, that primal fear is still in us. Now we're afraid of being the odd one out, of ridicule, of being judged. Mass psychosis feeds on that fear. Back in the 1950s, psychologist Solomon Asch ran a famous experiment. He showed people lines of different lengths and asked them to pick which ones matched. The answer was obvious, but when the other people in the room, who were secretly actors, gave the wrong answer on purpose, most participants caved and agreed with the wrong choice, just to fit in. Think about that. They trusted the group over their own eyes. That's how mass psychosis starts. Not with monsters and dictators, but with everyday people who are too afraid to stand alone. Now imagine that fear multiplied across millions of people, boosted by social media, 24-hour news, and lightning-fast communication. What you get is a psychological virus, an epidemic of obedience that spreads without anyone noticing. And here's the twist. When people give up thinking for themselves, they don't just go neutral. They can actually become aggressive toward anyone who threatens the group's shared illusion. Nietzsche warned, "Madness is rare in individuals, but in groups, parties, nations, and ages, it is the rule." That's why truth-tellers often face anger, mockery, or even censorship. Not because their facts are wrong, but because they threaten the false sense of safety the crowd clings to. Many of these people are educated and smart on paper. But intelligence without awareness is like a ship with no compass. You can be brilliant and still be completely lost. The result? We live in a world full of people who have information but lack clarity. They know what to think, but not how to think. They confuse consensus with truth and compliance with virtue. And honestly, it's not all their fault. Society trains us this way. Schools focus on memorizing facts instead of questioning them. The media sells emotion, not accuracy. Social media rewards outrage, not wisdom. We're trained to react, not to reflect. So how do we break free? The antidote starts with building an inner firewall, a mental filter that blocks the noise, questions the assumptions, and protects your clarity from being hijacked by the crowd. Ask yourself the hard questions. Why do I believe what I believe? Who benefits from me believing this? What if I'm wrong? What if everyone else is? And here's a powerful one. When was the last time I changed my mind because of evidence, not social pressure? That single question can shatter illusions. Jung once warned that one of the most dangerous things in life is following the crowd while believing you're thinking for yourself. He urged us to face our own shadow, the parts of ourselves we hide or deny. And today, that shadow has grown huge on a collective level. You can see it in the projection, the blame, the hysteria, all signs that society is in psychological distress. But here's the good news. You're not powerless. Your awareness is the lifeboat. And even if it feels like you're rowing alone, there are others out there doing the same. Once you start waking up from the mass illusion, you notice things other people miss. The sneaky emotional hooks in headlines, the loaded language designed to stir anger instead of thought, the quiet double standards, and the deafening silence around inconvenient truths. And yes, with this clarity often comes loneliness. Seeing clearly in a blind world can feel isolating, but that's not a curse. It's a rite of passage. Every awakened thinker in history has walked this path. Socrates, Galileo, Jung, Orwell. Those who can see beyond the illusion often walk alone, but never truly alone. In every era, there are others, quietly questioning, quietly watching, waiting for the right moment to speak, to resist, to rebuild. That moment is now. Because the longer mass psychosis spreads, the more reality gets twisted, and the harder it becomes to get sanity back. Kids grow up without critical thinking. Truth turns into a maybe instead of a solid foundation. Society becomes a stage play where no one remembers the original script, only the roles they've been assigned. So ask yourself, am I living by truth or by fear? To understand mass psychosis, we have to start with the individual mind. Because society is just a collection of individual minds reacting to fear, desire, and meaning. It often begins when people lose trust in leaders, in institutions, even in each other. Anxiety rises, certainty fades, and the old ways of making sense of the world stop working. That's when people become vulnerable. Stage 1 is disorientation. You sense something's wrong, but you can't put your finger on it. The world feels unstable, and you feel powerless. Stage 2 is simplification. A clear narrative suddenly appears, usually pushed by the media, the government, or a charismatic figure. It gives you a villain, a solution, and a heavy dose of emotion. It tells you exactly who to blame, what to fear, and what to do. Complexity disappears. It's now good versus evil, us versus them. Stage 3 is conformity. People stop questioning, not because they're convinced, but because they think everyone else believes it. This is called pluralistic ignorance. Most people might secretly disagree, but since no one speaks up, it looks like everyone agrees. Silence turns into complicity. Stage 4 is aggression. Once the new reality is accepted, anyone who resists becomes a target. The crowd starts policing itself. Debate dies. Questioners are labeled as dangerous. History shows us this happens in every totalitarian regime, not because people are inherently evil, but because the system rewards obedience and punishes independent thought. Finally, stage 5 is awakening. The illusion starts to crack. Reality pushes through. People begin to notice the gap between what they're told and what they actually experience. At first, it's just a quiet question. Is this really true? But as more people ask, the collective spell weakens. Awakening can be slow or it can be sudden, and it's often painful. It means realizing that much of what you believed, trusted, or defended wasn't real. It means facing how easily the mind can be manipulated. But that's also the turning point, because clarity is born out of that discomfort. Viktor Frankl, who survived the Nazi concentration camps, once wrote that those who survived weren't necessarily the strongest, but the ones who had a deep sense of meaning, something real inside them that the chaos couldn't destroy. And that's the key to escaping mass psychosis, anchoring your mind to something deeper than public opinion. That could be a personal philosophy, a spiritual practice, or a commitment to truth, even when it's uncomfortable. Whatever it is, it has to be so deeply rooted that no trend, slogan, or narrative can replace it. It takes courage because seeing clearly in a world gone blind isn't comfortable. You might lose friends, you might be mocked, you might feel alone, but you have to ask yourself, would you rather be comforted by lies or awakened by truth? Now let's talk about how to stay mentally free when everyone else seems hypnotized. First, embrace silence. Not the silence of fear, but the silence of awareness. Pay attention to your own thoughts. Where did they come from? Are they based on facts or just feelings? Do they serve truth or just comfort? This kind of quiet observation is an ancient practice, found in both Stoicism and Buddhism, and it's the foundation of mental independence. Second, lower your emotional reactivity. Mass psychosis feeds on people who react instantly, without thinking. The more triggered you are, the easier you are to manipulate. Start asking yourself, why did that comment make me angry? Or why did that headline make me afraid? Emotional discipline isn't about shutting down your feelings. It's about taking charge of them. Third, reconnect with meaning. Whether it's through philosophy, spirituality, creativity, or nature, You need something that transcends the chaos. As Nietzsche put it, he who has a why to live can bear almost any how. Meaning is an antidote to manipulation. Fourth, build real community. Not an echo chamber where everyone agrees, but a circle of people who value truth more than comfort. People who can listen, challenge, and grow with you. One awakened mind is powerful, but many, connected by honesty, can change the course of history. Finally, here's the last and most powerful revelation. The real escape from mass psychosis isn't about resisting the crowd. It's about no longer needing a crowd. There comes a moment when the noise of the world fades and a new kind of silence appears. Not ignorance, not avoidance, but deep clarity. You see through the illusion, and most importantly, you see yourself. This is the ultimate freedom. Not fearing isolation, not needing approval, and not relying on the shifting moods of public opinion to define you. The deepest root of mass delusion isn't fear of truth, it's fear of being alone with the truth. When people fear isolation more than they fear lies, they'll choose lies every time. But once you can stand in your own presence, even if it's uncomfortable, you're untouchable. Mystics and philosophers have said this for centuries. The Danish thinker Søren Kierkegaard once wrote, "The crowd is untruth." He didn't mean you should live in total isolation, only that truth begins in the individual, in the person who dares to see themselves without the mirrors of others' opinions. Mass control works by separating you from your inner compass. But here's the secret. It's never broken, just buried. Buried under fear, shame, and noise. Escaping the mass illusion isn't about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you are. And yes, that remembering can hurt. You might grieve for the years you spent in illusion, for relationships built on falsehood, for truths you ignored to fit in. But grief is a doorway to strength. Once you remember who you really are, beneath the programming and the personas, you stop reacting to the madness around you. You start observing it. You stop chasing approval and start seeking alignment. From that space, you radiate something rare, integrity. Others will feel it. Some will be drawn to it. Others will be threatened by it. But it won't matter, because your peace no longer depends on their approval. This is the ultimate escape, not running from the world, but no longer needing its validation. You become living proof that another way is possible, not by preaching, not by fighting, but by embodying clarity itself. When people see that you're not afraid to question, not afraid to be wrong, and not afraid to stand apart, something awakens in them too. And that is what mass psychosis fears most, the truly awake individual. Because one person like that, deeply rooted, immune to fear, is more powerful than 10,000 confused minds. If you've listened this far, you're not like the rest. You're part of a quiet rebellion, a rebellion of clarity, compassion, and consciousness. It can't be televised, bought, or controlled. It begins with questions, deepens with truth, and ends with liberation. The liberation of your mind, your soul, and your life. So ask yourself, what kind of world do you want to live in? One ruled by noise and hysteria, or one where people are awake, brave, and free? It starts with you. Speak your truth, even if your voice shakes. Stand your ground, even if you stand alone. The world doesn't need more clever followers. It needs conscious leaders. And you, if you choose, can be one of them. Let the madness rage if it must. You've found something deeper, yourself, and that is the beginning of the real revolution.